Good morning, everyone. Thrilled to have so many people here with us for this very important session. Why is it important? Because we are at the third edition already of the Board for Change program at Change Now. Today, we are living in unprecedented time of turbulence, and we are past the points of pledges or promises. Time is about action, right? But we know that change is never easy. Trust in institutions are declining, and many things are being challenged. Nevertheless, what gives me hope is that more and more people expect business to do good, to really solve the world's biggest challenges. And myself, I believe in business as a force for good. This is why boards are playing a pivotal role in the world. They don't sit anymore on the sidelines. No, they are at the very core, playing a pivotal role. This is what we are here for. The backlash is real. We are conscious about it. But it's not a signal to step back. No. It's a signal for us to turn our ambition into action and our hesitation into a momentum. Because whether we like it or not, planetary boundaries are here to stay. And if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? So without further ado, let me introduce you to an incredible leader. When I met him 10 years ago, I was in a boardroom of 58 CEOs of the world's largest company. And believe me, at that time, not many CEOs got it. This one did. He's a visionary. He is a pioneer, a true rock star of impact. Let's welcome on stage Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever, campaigner, and the author of Net Positive. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is this new?
Yes, it's new, it's for you.
New water. Good.
Thank you for being with us.
No problem.
It matters. So I'm going to ask the very first question that everybody in this room, so we have a crowd of 900 people. Most of them are board members, but not everyone. So we are living, as you were just mentioning at a breakfast, in an unprecedented time. So tell us how you feel about this very momentum and why the board of boards are becoming more critical than ever.
Yeah. Well, before I start my comments, let me say I feel very optimistic because there are many more opportunities than there have ever been. So take my comments in that context. But I do want to plug your book, though. This is Business as a Force for Good that Isabel wrote. She was signing it yesterday. I'm the only one who stole a copy without paying, as a Dutchman does. But I highly recommend you buy it. I was looking through it yesterday, preparing a little bit for today's talk, so my compliments. So don't forget to order this book. Anyway, I think to come to your question, what is the role of business in today's environment? It might be good to just realize, first of all, the context that we now have. Many of you have heard it many times in different panels yesterday and undoubtedly today, that these are unprecedented times. I mean, the shocks that we're going through, the economic shocks, the geopolitical shocks, the technology shocks, the geopolitical tension, and the list goes on. We've seen more coming at us at the same time than we've ever seen before. I personally think it's a good thing. When we had the financial crisis or when we had COVID, we had one thing to deal with. I leave it to you to answer if we did it well or not, but we just put bandages on the thing and we never really dealt with the real problem. When so many things are broken, some people call it the poly crisis, some people say we're entering a period of perma-crisis, but when so many things are broken, it's an ideal opportunity to really rethink how to put it back together. Now, the one thing that is for sure is that we don't know what's going to happen. This is a time of uncertainty. If some people sit here, and tell you this and this and this is exactly how you need to plan the next year, 5 years, or 10 years, I would look at the nose if the nose is growing and if the name is Pinocchio. We simply don't know. This is a period of incredible chaos that we've never had before. A new economic order that is being created that probably is a bigger change than anything we've seen since the 30s. And in my opinion, will stay with us for the next 5 or 10 years. Either we move to this fifth industrial order, or we create chaos for a longer period of time. And it's obviously for us to decide how to do that. Now, what is important in this is that the board start to realize that they increasingly need to move their mindsets away from just building shareholder value to increasingly building societal value.
That's
of course,
a big shift.
That is a big shift. That is a big shift.
Today, Paul, you're saying also that in this unprecedented time, sometimes you feel that board leaders are losing the courage to do so. What's your opinion here?
Well, my biggest fear is that too many, as I said, are still stuck in being stewards of the shareholders whilst they should be stewards of the future. There is this notion of fiduciary duties at the board, since we're talking boards, that I owe my whole life to the shareholder. So I don't know what is attractive to you to be a slave on a board to just make shareholder value if you don't have a deeper purpose of why we're here in the first place. That concept has never been attractive to me, nor is that really a good interpretation of what the fiduciary duties are in most, if not all, jurisdictions in the world. You need to be there to safeguard the long-term viability of companies, and the only way that you can safeguard the long-term viability of companies, which by the way is also in the interest of most of the shareholders, will be to look at optimizing the return for, by definition, all your stakeholders. And what has changed in this is that increasingly people are starting to realize that the stakeholders are not just the ones that, the voices you can hear, but there are also voices you can't hear, like the planet, like future generations.
So what did you do when you were at Unilever, for instance? What was the first thing that you did with your board?
Well, so the one thing, to finish my sentence there, is if I look at it now, I regret that in the conference rooms at Unilever, I put a chair, and it was an empty chair. People wanted to sit on it. I said, no, that chair is empty. People felt uncomfortable. What is that chair for? I said, that chair is for the citizens of this world that we serve, because the company had become very internally focused. I regret that I didn't put 2 more chairs there, one for planet Earth and one for future generations, because we would have probably faster taken better decisions. So coming...
A chair, sorry, I'm asking, an empty chair? Or
empty chairs. Well, yeah, because the future generation, you can't sit down yet, but there is infinitely more people coming in future generations than what we have seen in the past. And yet we have the audacity to destroy more in the last 50 years than in the whole history of humanity. So
that's a good call
we
to
know
action.
The statistics. Yeah, that's a small call to action. But so what I did at Unilever, I don't have many demands. I was surprised I got the job. I thought there were many people more qualified for the job. And I came in from the outside. It was the height of the financial crisis, so it was difficult. But my only request was actually to change the board. We had a wonderful... Yeah,
Why?
and well, we had a wonderful board without any doubt. We had 6 white Dutchmen and 6 white Englishmen, and they could disagree so strongly that they thought they were more diverse than they'd ever been or ever seen in the world. I don't know if you've ever seen a Brit and a Dutch in the same room, but it's an interesting discussion. So we had a very diverse board, and probably served the company well up to a point. But this was a company that for the last decade wasn't performing very well and had seen its business drastically decline, was in a selling mode. So as I needed a new management team, I changed about 75 of the top 100 people in the first year. And that was hard work, especially if you come in from the outside. I also had to be sure that the board was held to that same standard. So we moved right away to a 50-50 board in gender. We had 2 people from the Far East. We had 2 people from Africa. We had the first black woman from Harvard and Fudge. And we had a very diverse board. It happened to be 50% women. I was happy about that.
Which was
But
very
also,
pioneer at that time.
We certainly were the first company, and it still is the case now, actually. Once you have it, it changes the dynamics in the company. But I also had to look at people that had a skill set that was in line with what we needed. So the 2 things I did really was create the right environment, hopefully, to succeed, although you never know when you do that. So one of them is to have the right board. They're becoming very important. And these people need to be aligned with the direction you want to take the company. They need to challenge you. They need to be diverse. They need to bring their different skill sets to the board. But they also need to be partners in that journey. And then the second thing I did, which was equally important, stop quarterly reporting, stop giving guidance.
This was so courageous at that time.
Well, I don't know if it was courageous or if it was stupid, but you needed to create space for people to do the right thing. People are in many companies, too myopically focused on the short term.
I have not heard about another company listed on the stock exchange market that did the same thing.
Yeah, regretfully, very few followed. But what we saw when we did that was, obviously, the energy in the company was more towards value creation, which you don't do in a quarter. A value creation you do over 5 years, 10 years. It doesn't mean you don't deliver. I always separate that. People are afraid if you say you run your business for the long term, you don't deliver for the short term. In fact, the opposite happens. You deliver better for the short term to have an even better result for the long term. But we stopped that. And the reason was really to move the boundaries to change people's behavior. So what we also saw happening as a result of that, our shareholder base became more longer term. Because instead of this explaining on the call that Ramadan shifts every year or that there was a bad month for ice cream because the sun wasn't shining, we could talk more of the longer term strategy. And that tends to attract higher quality shareholders that are more interested in your company.
Oh, this is so interesting because we're here to discuss the role of boards. Of course, based on what you're saying, it's all about people, but you also have a vision and an influence about your shareholder.
Oh, absolutely. The board represents the shareholders, if you put it in that framework, and I don't disagree with that. But who are your shareholders? You know, a company like Unilever has millions of shareholders. And one wants you to split up the company. One wants you to pay more dividends. One wants you to buy companies and grow. None of them has ever run Unilever, may I add. And if you would listen to all of them, I think you'd be bankrupt before you know it. So many of them are not shareholders. And now in companies, in 7 months, the total market cap of companies turns over. So many of them are what I call share speculators, and we should change the names. You know, you're a share speculator, you've held the stock for 3 or 4 years, you're a shareholder. So, and start to identify them. But we shouldn't dance to the tunes of the shareholders. That's a very simple concept and a very simple soundbite. We should actually be more proactively, and the board should play a role in that, seek the right shareholders to support the strategies that the board is obviously delegating to management. And it takes time. And even in the case of Unilever, it took probably 5 years to see a fundamental change in the shareholder base. I certainly discovered naively that it was easier to lose shareholders by telling them you don't like them than to attract new shareholders. You know, you cannot talk your way out of things you've behaved yourself into. So you have to earn the right to get new shareholders. And that takes a little longer.
It's all about alignment and aligning words and action. And maybe let me interrupt you for a second, because we have something very unique in this fireside chat. We have prepared, and please, I'm looking at the people backstage. Please stand on the screen the QR code. We have a QR code because we are all very lucky to have Paul with us today, but you are also very lucky because it's a moment where you can ask Paul any question. regarding, please, the role of boards, because this is a
Thanks.
panel about boards. Otherwise,
I appreciate it.
And I'm going to grab my phone. We're going to select a couple questions. So we won't have time to ask everyone questions. But one question already coming in. Paul, interesting one. How can we ensure that the board is accountable for the next generation?
By having the discussions and by educating the boards, that would be one thing. It was interesting, and things are changing so fast, and we were pioneering so many things that I couldn't keep my learning up at a speed that was different than the board speed. That is very important, that you keep the board with you. So we installed these learning sessions, and these learning sessions were always the day before the board meetings. We had, at Unilever, we had 8 board meetings a year or 9 board meetings, don't quote me. But I said to the boards, you know, there are so many things we need to learn on this changing landscape already then, especially in the areas of sustainability at that time, or the climate science and other things that were relatively new. How to do value creation. Technology was equally developing then. So we installed these learning sessions, and
the learning were on the ground?
It was the same
youth?
moment that I would actually learn things, and management would present. Sometimes people would come in from the outside, but I said to the board, it's voluntary, because, you know, there are only so many things you can ask a board to do. But it had 100% attendance all the time, so we learned together. I think that's part of holding each other accountable, is to be part of a team. Having a distance to hold people accountable, but at the same time being part of a team is very well possible. The other thing I did, which was important, was we had a very rigorous performance management system in Unilever that was the same for everybody, including myself. And I actually put the board on the same system. So this notion that you are a 9-year board member, or that you automatically get, you know, it's very rare that shareholders vote you off. Some board members, you know, if you look in the US now, 1 in 5 board members is over 75 years old. You know, they weren't even there when they were running the companies. The CD wasn't even invented, let alone what they think about AI. You have to be pretty smart at 75 to keep up with that. So we held the board members to that same standard, and then said with these performance reviews, it's also not a given. It used to be a given that you would be 9 years on the Unilever board, but that was not the case anymore after that.
I have other questions. So that's a good one compared to what you just said. So how do you envision the role of AI and tech in the boardroom today?
Well, we can talk a lot about AI, and I will leave the discussions out on ethics of AI, but it is clear that geopolitics has taken over, that you don't have a global standard, that you probably see bifurcation of systems emerging in the world. I imagine Europe will have a different standard than the US. China might have a different standard. India will come in. So how AI is going to shape out in different parts of the world might be slightly different. But I think the AI is more than technology. If you look at surveys now, and I don't know if they are all correct, but they say that the bulk of CEOs or the bulk of boards see AI as a way to save, to efficiencies, to change processes like SNOP, you know, sales, operating planning, that type of thing. But I think it misses the bigger picture. I think the AI possibilities that we have allow you to completely rethink your business models. And some of the leading companies are doing that. Rethink your governance, rethink your contract of trust that you have with society. And so if you see this as an enabler, it's not an end in itself, but if you see this as an enabler, it could become actually your best friend to convert your company to truly being a net positive, sustainable company.
This is so powerful to have AI as an enabler and see that as a catalyst of change, helping your companies, your board, and your governance move forward. So last question before we close, because you know that it's all about leadership, always has been, always will be. What does it truly take as a leader of the board to act as stewards for better futures? If there was one thing.
Well, there's never one thing, so this is a very difficult question. But what we saw in COVID, we saw a bifurcation between companies that were myopically focused on the shareholder and companies that were run for multiple stakeholders. And the companies that were run for multiple stakeholders had embedded sustainability in the core of their operations. It actually became their strategy, embraced partnerships, thought long term, had a strong purpose of why they were running these businesses. These companies were doing better than the ones myopically focused on the shareholder. But interestingly, we also saw for the first time a clear bifurcation in leadership, where companies that had leaders, and this includes the board, leaders with a high level of empathy, a high level, a strong purpose. Purpose and empathy results in courage. So a strong courage, pioneers in a sense, embracing partnership, unlocking that energy. These companies were, for employees in very uncertain times, provided a beacon, and they were doing significantly better. So this bifurcation of leadership is happening. So what we now need is leaders that think net positive, that don't think as sustainability as a side hobby. You see too many companies dropping it now like flies in 2 seconds. It tells you that they are in the CSR mode, that it hasn't really been embedded in the core of the company. So they didn't really believe in DE. How can you drop DE&I because a president makes a phone call? You must have a serious problem believing in gender if you overtly would do that. How can you drop ESG within a minute because there's a little bit of pressure? You must have a serious problem of being convinced that it drives your business or not. So the good boards understand that it drives it. The good boards think net positive. They think restorative, reparative in a world that is already overshooting its planetary boundaries.
If you have not read the Net Positive book of Paul,
it's worth reading.
Definitely read it.
And a good board, the last comment would be, a good board knows that these issues are of such magnitude that we all need to work together to address them. They go beyond their companies. They go into
leadership
with governments, in advocacy, not in lobbying, in advocacy, in partnerships with industries, etc.
I'm going to finish with Paul about a story that you wrote not so long ago that I love. Is you say that when you tell story to your children or your grandchildren,
right,
that not a single one ends with the hero giving up.
Right, exactly.
So I have a little surprise for you. I love surprises.
Okay.
There is, for me, my favorite book that I read to my kids, but not only to my kids. It's called The Little Prince.
Ah, good.
From Saint-Exupéry.
Yeah, yeah.
And why do I love it? Because there are so many relevant things in this book, especially the one saying we don't inherit the earth from our parents, but we borrow it from our children. So I have a book of The Little Prince for you, but signed by the next generation of leaders that are the delegates of this Change Now event.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
I'm going to get it to you. 1 sec.
I have to say that's better than Machiavelli's Prince book, so I'm not sure that's fully applicable anymore. Am I? Wow, look at this. You are too nice.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you, Paul.
for my 7 grandchildren. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay. I'll see you later. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes. So, I'm going to move into the next panel, where I'm going to welcome incredible leaders when it comes to the role of boards. And now it's time to move from reflection to action, and I'm very, very, very honored to welcome on stage Marie-Claire Daveux, a non-executive board member of Crédit Agricole NG Le Ponant, and known also as her role of Chief Sustainability and Institutional Affairs at Kering. Please, Marie-Claire, if you're ready, come on stage. I am also very honored to welcome on stage Laurence Debroux. Laurence has been a board member for several years in companies that I admire so much, like Novo Nordisk, but also Exor, Randstad, and many more. And she's a leader who truly uses purpose as a compass, every day, everywhere, and with everyone. Please, Laurence, welcome on stage.
Laurence, welcome on stage.
Personne. Paul is grabbing everyone, you know how he is. And last but not least, because this journey is not that easy, right? So it's a learning journey. And to learn every single day, we are very pleased to welcome on stage our dear partner from INSEAD, the Dean of INSEAD, Francisco Veloso. I think this is mine. Yes? We may need water for my guests. I only have one glass with water, sorry. And Nicol, Sylvie Nicol, please welcome on stage. Sylvie is an executive leader at Henkel, and she is representing the executive side because it's all about governance. And it was important for us to understand also what is the executive perspective on the role of boards. Welcome on stage. So with this unprecedented time, I'm going to start by asking you maybe, Laurence, how do you see the pivotal role of boards in this moment?
Thank you. And I did find the previous presentation by Paul fascinating, and a lot of it about education we'll come back to. But why it is pivoting? Well, a well-functioning board for me in any circumstance is really a board that is a constructive, critical friend to management. So there is this notion of supporting and challenging on the right topics. So why particularly pivotal now? Because every role, every stakeholder's role is pivotal because that's a pivotal moment. So everyone needs to play their role at best. And I would say, I'm not representing executives here, but I do feel for the many, many conflicting injunctions and for the huge pressures that executives are under. So there is a moment for board to actually keep a cool head, stay calm, and help executive keep the compass on strategy and on execution, particularly on that topic. So that's how I would define
Thank
it.
you.
And we will come back on how.
Yes, of course. So that's a good transition to you, Sylvie, because representing the executive board here, how do you see the role of board in this specific time?
So thanks for having me first. Very happy to be there. I would say the first thing is that the board defines the purpose and the strategy that the team has to follow. So for us, the purpose is pretty clear and fitting to the times, pioneers at heart for the good of generations. That's the message we communicate to the team. That's how we want them to operate business. So the how, the direction that you set, I think is one of the big responsibilities of the board. And the second one is to create the conditions. Facilitate leadership, make sure that all your processes, your recruitment, your training, your leadership culture is aligned for sustainable transformation.
But that is every day, if I may say. Do you have a specific, with your board right now, given the current context and the current challenges, is there anything specific right now happening? Or because your governance is quite stable, because you are very unique also, it's business as usual, if I may say.
Yeah, our governance is pretty unique, as you say, because our main shareholder is a family. So
this makes a big difference.
Voilà, the head of the supervisory board is the chairwoman. She is the fifth generation of the Henkel family. She's ensuring continuity and making sure that the company will still be there in the future. And that makes a huge difference because that sets the tone. It's not about the quarter only. We are also in the DAX, so performance matters. But it's also about how do we transfer the company to the next generation? How do we ensure success, profit, but as well responsibility?
This is so precious to be in a family-owned company. Marie-Claire, this is not the case in several boards where you stand, but how do you see the role of boards in this current context?
First, good morning, everyone. I think today, above all, because we have, I will say, a complex world where the things are changing very fast for the management, it's very important that the board help to have a step back. And so to be sure that, because also the topics are more and more with intelligence artificial, when we speak about climate change, and Paul was mentioning the fact that it's important to train the board. I think if I have only to say one sentence, it's really to help to take a step back and to be sure also that we push about the new topics and not only the current topics that the executive management as already in mind, I will say the current job, but really to say, push the boundaries, see what could happen in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years, and depending on the industry, sometimes the executive management, of course, above all when you are listed, you think about the 2 next years, the 3 next years, but I think the board has really to push people to go beyond the classical things.
And how, as a board member, do you step back and really help the leadership team move its perspective for future or sustainable business?
But I think, and you didn't ask the question, but it's a way to answer, it depends also on the composition of the board. And I think it's really important at the board to be sure that you have different kind of profile. Of course, you need men and women, you need people with more experiences, young people, but also people who are coming with financial, of course, but also IT experience, environmental experience, to be sure that at the end of the day, and I like to say in this way, you have also a kind of biodiversity inside the board. And I think you have...
Never heard it before, that's a good one.
Yeah, no, but it's great. You have a collective intelligence to push people to think also in a matrix approach. Because sometimes, and also I am executive, so I know how it works, you are more in only one channel, and you don't think about the complexity, perhaps you think less about interaction, and it's the role of the board to push about it.
Oh, thank you so much. And maybe Francisco, given your role, and INSEAD is not only partnering with us for the program, but is an amazing program to train. And I don't know how many leaders you've trained.
Well, several thousand.
Several thousands. But more than the volume, everyone that I know of is telling me that you're the best program. Why so?
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here. I think that basically it speaks to the core of the elements that have been brought here about the knowledge. But even before going there, I want to stress something that I think is quite important at the board level, which is the choice of leadership. You know, we're talking about the executive and the role of boards, but one of the first key roles that boards have is to choose leadership. Who is leading the company? Not just the CEO, but the boards are typically also involved in the senior management team, the C-suite. And that decision in this day and age is absolutely essential to try to make sure that the right leaders are coming into the company to be able to navigate these difficult times and to make sure that they bring some of these elements that we're talking about, you know, to the forefront. I mean, in terms of the program, that goes to the other parts, which is the knowledge. I mean, what boards need to know is changing so fast, not only because of the longer term, you know, we talked about already in AI, and I'm sure we'll come back to that, sustainability. Paul talked about circularity and regenerative. These are all topics, are all issues that we need, you know, to understand how to bring that discussion into the board to make sure that the executives are looking at that. And many are different topics, you know, to really think about how to put in place a regenerative supply chain, a net positive supply chain is not an easy thing. It's something that really requires different kinds of mindsets. So how do you think about that? And how do you think about that in a grounded way? And this is quite important for INSEAD, because INSEAD is an intellectually led school. So what we bring to the board programs is what our faculty are looking at and what they're finding that works or doesn't work, the new trends, the new opportunities, the new challenges. And that's what makes it, a really important and attractive program that we're, of course, very proud of.
Thank you so much. I feel so proud to have amazing speakers on my side for this moment. I'm going to ask you a few questions because I think that we all understand now in this room. And thank you for being everywhere. I don't think there are seats left, but thank you for being there all on the balcony also. I hope you can hear well. I'm going to ask you now specific examples, right? Because we all want to learn, and we all are here convinced about this role of boards. So it's more about what example, what insights, what inspiration, what activities, what actions, who did inspire you, or you've seen that shift happening in the boardroom.
Yes? Okay. So I'm lucky to sit at the board of Novo Nordisk in Denmark. So even though I am not a spokesperson for the company, so you won't hear me quoted, a lot of what I'm describing is actually happening there. I'm going to be the boring one because I'm the chair of audit committee, and I'm going to talk about governance and about, training that muscle of having the right discussion. And I totally agree with Paul and with what you've said. It starts with training, and it's continuous education of the board. And I would say one of the things that I really like is when the board and the executive management are trained together. So board members don't come only with what they know or sometimes with what they like, but really have a common language, a common understanding of what matters to the company. Let's not forget that board members meet, 5, 6, 8 times a year? That's not too much. Things happen. A lot of things happen in between, and that's absolutely normal. But you want to have the right discussions. You want to have the discussion on what is really relevant to that company here and now and is carrying it into the future. And for me, there are a few things that actually regulation imposed to us that were very useful. I actually very, very much like the discussion on double materiality assessment. In some companies, it was just actually translating things that had been discussed for a long time. And even then, even in very good company, we did find that it was worth revisiting it with that framework.
Okay.
But in any case, by having that discussion, not only putting a stamp on very good work made by expert team, and really discussing what made the cut, and also what almost made the cut but didn't make it. That is a part of the discussion that I triggered actually with the audit committee, and I really like. It's like, if something was borderline and you didn't select it, why was that? And can you explain? And can we talk about it? That is something that was very important to me, and I really like that exercise and to share it with the full board. After that, for me, it's a lot into the clear mapping of governance. Who does what? What stays with the full board? Strategic discussion. What goes to the different committee? How do we interact? How do we make sure it's not only outsourcing to a committee, but brought back together?
Governance and
the whole governance circle, and that is, I would really say, it's fully integrated in the governance circle, but we have now data. We used not to have such clear KPIs. We have some KPIs, we have some norms. That's much, much better. Let's not completely disregard storytelling. People need both.
Say common language, storytelling, that matters to bring people together.
Because people need to be inspired. It needs to be monitored, but they also need inspiration. So the good thing today is that there is no way a company can get away with only storytelling, but you also need stories.
Thank you so much, Laurence. Maybe Sylvie, yes, I think having your perspective.
Maybe sharing two interesting observations, one more on the supervisory board and one on the executive board, because I have the privilege to be in both. In the supervisory board, our chairwoman realized that we need more time. The topic is complex. There are a lot of new topics permanently on sustainability, so she decided to create a subcommittee of the supervisory board fully dedicated to sustainability, where a few members of the supervisory board come together.
That's good, because this is something that if I'm not mistaken, in the last 4 years, this number of committees doubled.
Exactly, and that really makes a huge difference because you have the time you need, you can educate, you can really go deep in some topics, might be CSRD, might be target setting, might be challenges that you face, and they give guidance. They give guidance to experts. They talk directly to the experts of the company who are driving the topic. This guidance helps, but it's also strong encouragement. That means we are behind you, we support you. We are going to be with you on the journey. So that really, really helps us. In the other direction, in the board, in the executive board with my colleagues, so for sure we have a lot of business topics. When we set our net zero pathway last year, we made the commitment to become climate positive by 2045 as a company. It required also a lot of time investment. We had to level the playing field. We have two business units which are extremely different, B2B, B2C. You can imagine that having common ambition on two businesses which are so different is difficult.
So it took
several rounds of education, of alignment, of creating the narrative together, deciding how we're going to communicate that to the organization, and then taking responsibility collectively to bring this narrative in the organization and to pave the way for the teams to commit and to really execute this pathway. So it all comes back to strong governance, time investment. It doesn't come without effort.
Time investment and also allowing time. I mean,
exactly.
It takes time to take bold
It's a very humbling topic, very humbling. You need to learn permanently.
Thank you so much. Marie-Claire?
Alors, very quickly, for me, 3 points. The first, it was already mentioned, it's about training. But I will say specific training, which are also on the ground, because it's great to have experts, to have people that come to speak and to raise awareness. But I think when you are at the level of the board, it's really very important to see what does it mean on the ground in link with the business side. And I'm very, I will say happy because I am at the board of NG and also Crédit Agricole, but we do the same thing for Caring, and I would like to say welcome to 2 board members of Caring in the audience, so hello girls. I think it's very important that it's organized to see, take example of sustainability, what does it mean for the resilience on the supply chain? So one thing. Second thing, it's very linked also with the chairman or the chairwoman to be sure that the directors will be enough comfortable to say what they think and to dare to challenge, because sometimes there is the theoretical approach and the reality.
It is so true because, you know, in corporates, we talk a lot about the CEO and the role of boards. We are starting to discuss the role of the chair, but it is not there yet so much tackled.
So that's why I think for the second point, when we think about the board, I think the chairman has a specific role to play and to be sure, okay, directors, if you don't agree, please express. It's really freedom to express. And after, it's a collective approach. And last but not least, I think also what is very important is to have transparency between the executive management and the board. So when there is a failure, when there is, I will say, something that goes wrong, to be sure that even if by rules or by regulation the executive management is not obliged to share and to be transparent, because it's important to have trust. And sometimes it's difficult also to build the trust because, as you mentioned, one of the key roles to the board is really to identify the CEO and also people from the executive committee. So the most important thing for me is trust. And of course, after you train people, you explain. But it's more, I will say, technical things and technical things. We have answers. What is more difficult, it's trust.
Yes. Francisco?
I wanted to go back to the training part and to think about why that is important in the context of the discussion that we're having and some of the things that have been mentioned and also Paul mentioned before, which is this notion that most of the people that are here are already with the right mindset, but many don't have yet either the right mindset, or even if they have the right mindset, they may not have kind of the actionable approach that they can do. And this is something that is quite important and kind of the approach that we take in the way that we think about training the boards, which is part of that. I mean, in particular, this issue of going from compliance, for example, into competitiveness is a very important shift. And thinking about what does that mean, show examples, share with others, is a very important part of that change of mindset and making the board comfortable with that shift and understanding what that means. You know, of course, when we do it at a high level and then bringing it to the specifics of the board about what does that mean for my company, for my context, for my aspect. The other aspect that's quite important, and I think is going to become even more heightened in these, is navigating dilemmas, which is another of the topics that we bring to our board program. The first one is, you know, Subirangan, that typically teaches the one of going from basically compliance into competitiveness, and that Mark Menestrel that teaches the one on navigating dilemmas. And this is quite important because of the challenge that we face. I mean, it's very clear, and this is the reason that connects to the trust point that you were making, that there's going to be difficult decisions to be made. And so that trust is the foundation, but then you think about how do you navigate that? How do you do that between the executive side, between the board side? How do you create that dialogue is going to be quite important, and preparing boards to be able to do that.
Thank you.
And again, to do it in a way that's grounded. And for example, I'll give you one snippet of that. I mean, there's a lot of basically talk about CSRD and what CSRD means, but we're finding on the data that CSRD is making a difference on the way that boards and companies address and deal with sustainability from that competitiveness point of view, and that's a very important part to do.
We have a screen here, and it says time out, time out, time out. So one word about what it takes as a leader to make the shift happen. One word. Skill, whatever, one word.
Collective mindset.
Team exercise.
Resilience.
Courage.
Thank you. That's my word. Thank you so much to every one of you. Bravo. Avec une photo tous ensemble. The team wants you all on stage.
We want the star.
We want our guest star. Attends, je vais me mettre au milieu. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Sorry, we continue the show. You know what? We have heard amazing leaders when it comes to the role of boards. And we were wondering, do you hear me well? Yes? So I'm going to do a little trick here. Do you know on which stage we are? Yes? It's the legacy stage. And when we talk about the role of boards, it's about the legacy we want to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a friend, right? Because understanding what's please for the next speakers, may take a seat. I'm going to call a friend from the next generation that I love And I want to make sure that we capture together what she has to say to us. Hi. Do you hear me? Do you hear me, Clover? I'm at Tinge now. I would love to get
You
your
know what?
perspective.
I'm actually backstage at the Grand Palais, so
Oh, no,
why
you're
didn't I just come
kidding.
to you?
You're kidding, Clover. Come on stage with me. I want to hear you right now. Hello. Please take a seat. Thank you so much, Clover. We could not do a session on the board without the next generation. This was not possible. So this is why you are here with us. So, Clover, when it comes to the board, what is your voice and what is your expectations towards those boards?
Well, it's funny being here in Paris with you all because I was actually here 10 years ago for COP21 for the Paris Agreement. I was a 16-year-old student activist back then. And I remember going into COP21 with this kind of starry-eyed optimism, right? All of my activism had been at the grassroots, and I felt, finally, I'm going to be at the decision-making table where the adults are, and they're going to show up and solve this problem. And yet, the picture in my mind didn't really match up with reality. When I arrived at COP, instead of meeting inspiring world leaders, I met plenty of calculating policymakers who were expert in making commitments so far into the future they required no immediate action. No, I'm just giving some context. And you know, I'd never seen greenwashing at such a kind of unapologetic scale either. And so I wish that I could look back now and tell my younger and more skeptical self that I was wrong, but unfortunately I think we've really seen an absence of courage and leadership when it comes to corporations and when it comes to boards. So the short answer, I suppose, would be I would want to see more courage, and I would want to see boards and leaders who are acting from a place of legacy, but unfortunately that's not what we're seeing at the minute.
That's why we are on the legacy stage. Boards needs to be more vocal, as we were saying. So how can boards help you believe in themselves? So when I say believe in themselves, it's not about believing in boards, but what is the role of boards for the future generations?
Well, I think a lot of people are still treating sustainability as a kind of tick-boxing activity or a nice to have. And the science is really unequivocal, right? For the first time in history last year, we surpassed the 1.5 degree heating point, which was established in the Paris Agreement. We've now surpassed 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries. So I would like to see boards actually acting not from this place of kind of fantasy, but actually responding to the science. You know, we would see a very different corporate landscape and boardroom landscape if people educated themselves on what's happening.
We were discussing about education, and it's true that we were, and Paul was saying, have a seat for the next generation, have the seat for Mother Earth at the table, but we could also have a seat for the science.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with science. Unfortunately, a lot of people are deluding themselves that you can pretend that what's happening isn't happening, or you know, I think so many people in business are really, really good at putting their heads in the sand. And I think what was really interesting is that in the wake of the 2016 presidential election, you know, there are so many leaders who said, well, even though Trump is pulling out of the Paris Agreement, we're still in, right? And unfortunately, in this most recent election, just look at Trump's inauguration photo. Like, all of the tech CEOs are there, all of the billionaires are there. They're no longer acting on sustainability and climate because there isn't this momentum and it's no longer cool, right? And so we need leadership to actually happen when it is difficult. And I think the fossil fuel industry is throwing everything they possibly can to delay action. The fossil fuel industry funded the Trump administration to the tune of $75 million during his campaign, right? There's that quote, you know, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win.
So beyond the geopolitical tensions that we are living in, how can the next generation, as you, Clover, help boards to become stewards for better futures? How can you help?
Well, I would say that I think young people, we're often called radical, but what we're asking for really isn't that radical if you think about it. Like, young people are asking for the right to clean air, the right to clean water, to have a say in the decisions that are ultimately affecting my future and our future. That isn't that radical. We've been made to believe that it's radical. And so boards need to have young people at the table to actually hold them to account and to hear not just the moral courage of young people, but their capacity to imagine how we might do things differently. Young people are so good throughout all of the movements, civil rights, anti-apartheid, the suffragette movement. Young people are capable of not just asking why is the system the way that it is, but what if we did things really differently? And that what if question is what we need to be focusing on now.
I love the what if question. I'm a what if person. And maybe one last question is that what truly counts from your perspective in terms of leadership for the boardroom?
When I've worked with boards and they've told me they really care about climate, they want to take action, typically it's not because they've read the IPCC report or even because they went to COP, but because their kids came home to them at the end of the day and asked, Mom, Dad, what are you doing about the climate crisis? And so it is that question of legacy. So many business leaders work their entire lives climbing the corporate ladder to be able to provide for their families, and yet they're now at that pinnacle looking back and saying, okay, but what is the world that my kids are inheriting? And so that question of what you're actually leaving behind, realizing that you're part of this lineage, I think that can be the clarifying question for boards.
This is so true. What do you want to be your legacy to be? And myself, when I work so hard and when in challenging times, I'm always telling to myself that in 10 years from now, I want to look at my kids' eyes and say that I've done everything I could at a time that it really matters. Thank you, Clover, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, let me call you our last panel. And you know that Change Now is about bringing together change makers. Well, here we are also, in this third edition, bringing together collectives of boards. Why? Because when you are a change maker, when you are a board member, you need one another. That's the reality when you drive change. You are individuals. And today, for the first time at Change Now, we gather board members from 25 different countries. So this is a huge numbers, and thank you for being in this room. You are more than 600 to be there. So I'm very honored to welcome on stage 3 leaders of those board collectives. So to start, I'm going to ask Karina Litvak, who is not only, of course, a board member, but the co-founder of the Climate Governance Initiative, now called also Chapter Zero. Welcome on stage, please, Karina. Sit wherever you want. You have the picture there. Welcome on stage, so everyone is coming. Céline Fornaro is Deputy CEO at Agence des Participations Françaises, which in English, it's the French government's shareholder agency. No, please sit in the middle. I will sit here. And board member of Air France and NG, like Marie-Claire that we just saw. And then last but not least, Denis Terrien is the chair of IFA, the French organization for board members that has been very active also in gathering many board members from France, but also with our partners, Ecoda. Thank you for being with us. So I'm going to ask you the first question, not about your opinion about the role of boards, because I think that we get that from previous session, but why collective of board matters? Why collective of boards matters? Why do you bring people together as board members?
Shall I start? Yeah. So basically, I think a collective for board members is actually really important because it enables to cover some of the suggestions that maybe other people mentioned in the other panels, such as share, learn. And to be more specific, it could be different types of networks, really. It's a forum. I know IFA has got one. We have our own one. It's composed of 250 board members. You also have some with the World Economic Forum. And it's a way for board members to exchange, keep an open mind. Also,
how often do you meet?
So we have 2 annual big sessions where we would share and update our shareholder policy, for example, give updates on our companies. But also we have regular sessions, maybe once a quarter, on specific topics.
Where you have an external speaker?
Yes,
or, okay.
yes, and we have external speakers. But I think what is also important is that you cross-feed ideas, and it brings diversity, because this is where you have a lot of your board members that are different backgrounds, different experiences, and some of our board members are also executive management teams. And so that's where we also cross-feed that into our thinking as well, and the way we carry our dialogue
learning
with
from
the world.
one another. This is so true.
Well, one is not born a board member. It is like plumbing or baker. You have to become a board member. So there are a couple of ways to do it. One is to train yourself. INSEAD does it. And at IFA, we do a lot of training. Over 1,000 people are trained at IFA every year. But also it's an exchange with, as you would say, with other board members. And what is important to realize is that governance of a private company, of a public company, of an NGO, or of any organization is different, because you have different values that you're going to share, different stakeholders that you have to take care of.
So when you say, because the question is about the collective, so you bring people collectively on, like the board members of NGOs and then board members of...
Hence, this is exactly what we do at IFA. So not only we have over 4,000 board members, but they kind of meet with their own specificities. I'm a board member of an NGO, and I'm going to meet another 20 or 50 board members of NGOs and share with them the challenges that I have, and listening to them will help train me. I'm the board member of a startup and scale-up. I have very different challenges than of the listed company like Air France or NG. Hence, it's going to be good for me to share my experience and learn from the others. And what we do at IFA, with the 4,000 members, we have over 200 meetings a year with specific groups that meet and share their collective understanding of the challenges and how to deal with them.
Very specific, also collective and forums. That's another way to put it forward. And Karina, you have founded a movement. So why did you do so?
My story is a very selfish one, which was that there was no existing how-to manual that I could pick up or classes that I could attend to address the specific challenge that I was facing, which is how do you drive better climate governance in a board, particularly of a company, in my case, at the time, I was on the board of an oil major, and how do you drive transformation in a company that has a legacy that is 100%, connected to an obsolescing business? And so, not being able to find anybody or anything that I could learn from.
So you decided to create
I thought, let's create a collective initiative that I could then point to and say, guys, don't listen to me. Listen to these people out there who are doing all this great stuff. So that's why.
And today you are in, your movement is in 60 countries, right?
72, yeah, 72.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just gathered yesterday a lot of members. So interesting for us to hear more about the key takeaways from yesterday about how to move the needle in the boardroom, maybe.
Oh gosh, well, the 2-minute version. First start, I think the most inspiring thing about yesterday is that we got people from Kazakhstan, Botswana, Singapore, Brazil, as well as, of course, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. It was extraordinary to get people who were exchanging from so far away who never get an opportunity to meet, much less form friendships. And we discovered that we had the same values and the same anxieties, and we had an opportunity then to say, how do we confront this? And we learned a number of things. I mean, some of the key takeaways were, you know, more in the realm of sort of technical skills. We looked at audit and audit sort of methodologies and how to take account of climate drivers and impairment charges, things that are more technical. Okay. We looked at AI, but we also looked at soft skills. We looked at, you know, what is it that drives people to be obstructionist or resistant in the boardroom to the change that we often as one single voice want to drive.
So is there something that you can share? Because here there are many leaders that are change makers.
Yeah.
So what does it take to drive the change? Maybe what does it take to be resilient? Maybe helpful for everyone.
So it's interesting. One of the ones I went into, one of the workshops I went into yesterday was specifically about overcoming resistance. And it's interesting that we all came in with the same question, which was, how do I craft more persuasive arguments? You know, how do I reach people on a rational level to win the argument? And in fact, what we learned is that ultimately, it's how you connect with people on an emotional level. And nobody will admit that. Nobody will admit that, but it's how you touch them in their sense of status, autonomy, as in how much control they have, their sense of belonging. Like, do they feel that you're threatening their sense of belonging to this group? I mean, all things that are very, very soft and very uncomfortable to discuss. Two people got up and left.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting one. I think that mindset matters, but we also need to go beyond mindset. And maybe, Céline, you can share what you have put in place a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, about how do you help the company where you invest in to move the needle?
Yes, and I think it's a slightly different perspective maybe to some other people that participate in panels, as we are a very long-term shareholder as the French government in our corporates, which are 85 corporates from very big international top CAC 40 entities. I'm also at the board of Safran, for example, or Orange, to very small service companies, radio, French companies. And there is no one-size-fits-all. And we need to deal with this and share, I would say, our vision.
Get guidelines for everyone, right, on this topic?
Yes. And the thing that is important is that we need to define a policy and a framework that basically gives us great foundation, but remains agile, so can weather crisis, as we've seen, or volatility, or volatile times. And when you look at our policy, basically it's got three key pillars, which I think a lot of companies can refer to. The first one is performance, the second one is resilience, and the third one is sustainability. And with these three key pillars which drive our vision, really, you can talk from financial performance to sustainability performance, diversity, resilience.
And what did you put in, because I think that those are interesting for everyone in the room. In terms of sustainability, you did move the needle.
Yes, we try. And the way we do that is, for example, for listed companies, we have the minimum requirements of the Code AFEP-MEDEF. But we also like our companies to be ambitious, so we push them a little bit harder. And especially on some diversity targets or climate targets. We have some of the few CEO female leaders of the CAC 40 or the SBF 120. Yeah. We also have brought in diverse culture in management teams.
Okay.
So that I think is quite important.
So you still stand in this current context for diversity and the leadership team?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think we're here for the long term. And as Paul was saying at the beginning, for us it's really important to ensure the long-term viability of the company through different challenges. And we're here to provide this stability. But what is also important is how you bring people with you. That's where you need the collective. That's where you need to refer to your policy. Keep it, agile.
So your policy, what are the key dimensions that you have?
Yeah, so as I said, performance, resilience, and sustainability.
And in sustainability, what are the KPIs or the commitment that you expect every company to move forward?
Yeah, so in terms of KPIs, we wouldn't have a one-size-fits-all. It would be done at the corporate level. Okay. But you can see that we're now moving into carbon quantified targets, for example, in our executive compensations when there's a variable and mid and long-term targets.
Yeah, I think that you did implement in every single one of your participation, right? Having the executive incentive linked to those targets.
Absolutely, and there's also, of course, diversity, financial performance, and you will see that some of our large companies have actually increased the needle and the focus on that. We've just had all the AGMs or new compensations schemes released. So I'm sure everybody can that. We're very proud of this. Yeah, absolutely.
You can be. And Denis, in this way that, driving change in the boardroom, we have discussed, what it takes from a personality perspective, from guidance perspective. Any obstacles that you feel are happening in the boardroom that you consider?
I think in the boardroom there are two elements. One is compliance. There are elements you have to do, you have to make some decision or approve, like the accounts. However, good compliance will not bring success. It may avoid failure, and not always, but it will not bring success. What will bring success of a company is a very well-aligned governance. In
what
terms
do you call
of
an aligned governance?
very well, governance is a couple of elements. A vote on the strategy, approve the strategy and the budget. Ensure that the CEO, he or she can drive the budget and the strategy, and she's well remunerated. Look at the risk and the opportunities and communicate. If those elements are well defined and well structured, this is the first step. The second step, as was shared, it's not what you know, but how you make a decision. It's more on the behavior you have on a boardroom. What we advise all our board members is, after they're trained, to have the courage to take, to share their opinion on the board. We are talking about, how it is important to be collegial. The board is not one person deciding, it's the whole group. They decide as a group. However, for a good decision, not only you need diversity, which we talked earlier, but you also need people to have the courage to go with their own conviction, which is based on experience.
And how do you see the role of the chairwoman or the chairman?
The role of chairwoman as a chairperson is to help the dialogue between the different board members.
And in a scale of 1 to 10...
And what's interesting...
I want to ask you a question. In a scale of 1 to 10, Denis, how today you believe, for instance, in France, in the listed company, how much the chairperson is playing that role of opening up the dialogue, making sure. Scale of 1 to 10. 10, perfect. 1, not so well.
I think it has improved substantially. What we can see in companies is, it is not because you have a good governance that you always have success. However, when you have a failure, you always have challenges in governance. Even some state companies like Renault have some challenges in governance that leads to challenges in the companies. Other companies as well. So look at the companies that have fundamental challenges. You go back, there is not a proper governance. Then the role of the chair is ensure that all the topics are discussed. This is good compliance. That also he or she leaves the discussion within the room and ensure a decision is made.
Yes.
And sometimes it happens, I've been chairman of a company, I'm actually even chairman of a company today. Sometimes we do not have enough element to make the appropriate decision, and that's okay. Let's have the courage to say, we cannot make the decision, this board. If ever it's not business critical, let's lay it to the next board so that we'll have an informed decision made by the board.
Thank you so much. I fully agree with you. And maybe one last question to you, as it's all about leadership. So I'm going to ask you, from your perspective and your experience and your movements, what does it take as a leader to be a board member for better futures?
Well, you asked that question earlier, didn't you?
No,
right?
what is the one thing that
one thing,
you believe
yeah.
is... Yeah.
And we heard resilience, and we heard... and
yes, I heard the previous part.
Right.
That's correct, yeah.
And
I love this question.
I love this question too. And the one I was desperate to hear, and we didn't hear, so I'm going to say it, is principle. Because you can always find staff who are going to deal with operational resilience, who are going to deal with technical expertise, who are going to deal with, the execution. But we in the board, if we do not act on the basis of principle, then honestly, how is that leadership going to flow through into the company? And it goes back to what Paul was saying earlier. We have to have the courage of our convictions and the courage to care for that empty chair or those 3 empty chairs.
Thank you.
I'd probably say dare to be ambitious, not to be complacent. I think this is really important. The board provides this stability, long-term vision, and so you can't be complacent.
Merci, Sylvie.
If you allow, I will say 3 with 3 C's. The first is the curiosity. Curiosity to continue to learn about the world. Today there's AI. Yesterday was ESG, which was due for somebody. Who knows what the challenge is going to be, in 5 to 10 years. So you always need to be curious. The second is to have the courage. We talked about that. To have the courage to share what you believe in. And the last one is to be creative. Without creativity, one will not create value.
You know what? I usually say the 3C, and you probably know that. Courage, curious, and contagious. This is why you're here. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to every one of you. So this morning comes to an end, and I just want to say, I'm going to ask all the speakers to come back on stage for the picture, every single speaker. But in the meantime, I just want to give you one word, is that in this specific moment, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you cannot choose both. So make your choice. Thank you for being here, and I invite all my speakers to come back on stage for a picture.